Chapter 10 of New Adventures of Alice by John Ray. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 10 Iceberg. The speed at which they went tearing along was at first so great that Alice could make out nothing but a blur of dazzling light. The handcars soon slowed down, however, and she saw that they were approaching a neat little station at the end of a long dock which ran out into the ocean. The waves were running very high, although the sun was shining brightly, and the tiny station, which was built entirely of ice blocks, was dripping with the sparkling spray from the breakers. The name of the station, Iceberg, was lettered on a board which hung from the icicle-fringed eaves. Alice felt much relieved when the handcar came to a gentle stop at the station platform, for she had noticed that the track just beyond simply ran off the end of the dock and down into the water. She alighted hastily, and then remembering the candlestick maker, whom she had entirely forgotten in the excitement of the last few minutes, she turned to help him off. He had vanished, leaving only his curious hat behind. Alice now saw that the hat was, in fact, simply an average-sized brass candlestick of this sort, picture of candlestick. Saying to herself,
"I'll just keep this as a memento,"
she picked it up, and was just starting for the door of the station when a bell jangled loudly and a voice cried,
"Oh, aboard!"
and the handcar, starting with a jerk, ran down the few remaining yards of track into the sea and disappeared.
"Well, of all the strange railroads,"
Alice began, but just then she caught sight of a very white face with large coal-black eyes, a pointed red nose, and a scrubby stiff goatee. It was staring at her from a small window in the station. For a moment Alice was really frightened at this strange apparition, but it suddenly occurred to her that of course this was only a snowman, and that the carroty red nose was a carrot, the black eyes lumps of coal, and the goatee a worn-out paintbrush. "And he really has a very kindly expression, in spite of his unusual features," thought the little girl. It somehow did not surprise her much now to hear him ask pleasantly,
"Any baggage, miss?"
his paintbrush goatee wagging stiffly as he spoke.
"Nothing but this,"
answered Alice, holding up the candlestick, and noting as she did so that the candle was again burning. The sight of the candle apparently made the snowman quite nervous, for he said rather shakily,
"You might just blow it out, miss, if you don't mind. I can't abide a flame any sort, not since my brother almost died of a bonfire."
Alice blew out the candle, and the snowman, who seemed greatly relieved, continued politely,
"Just leave your bundle in the baggage room, if you like."
He pointed with a very short fat arm to a large clumsily wrapped package which Alice had certainly not seen before, standing just before her on the platform. She was just about to tell the station agent, for that was what the snowman evidently was, that it did not belong to her, when she noticed tied to the bundle a large tag upon which was printed in bold letters, "Yours."
"But,"
said Alice to herself, but half aloud, really hoping that the interesting package might prove to belong to her.
"But how do I know that the tag doesn't mean that it belongs to the snowman?"
The snowman heard her question.
"Why, miss?"
he said slowly, like a good-natured teacher patiently explaining something to a stupid child.
"You see, if it were mine, it would be marked mine. But as it isn't marked mine, why then of course it isn't mine. But if on the other hand it were yours, miss, then it would be marked yours. And as it is marked yours, why then of course it is yours and not mine. Or to put it other way,"
he went on triumphantly after taking a breath,
"if it were not yours."
Here he stopped, for Alice was no longer listening, but was already unwrapping the bundle, for, like most of us, she was always easily convinced of what she wanted to believe. First came several layers of newspapers, most of them the Gloucester Gazette and the Norwich News. Then straw tied round and round with a heavy cord, like a winter covering for a rose bush. Next came a ragged old quilt, decorated with a design of cabbage-like scarlet flowers. As the air was now very chilly, in spite of the bright sunshine, Alice stopped to drape this quilt about her shoulders like a sort of cape. She then removed the remaining wrappings from the bundle, consisting of a fish-net and several more newspapers, these being mostly Bunbury Bugles.
"Well, of all preposterous things!"
exclaimed Alice as she finally pulled off the last of the papers, for after all her trouble in undoing the great package, its contents proved to be only a rickety old bottomless bird-cage, upon the little padlock door of which hung a card bearing the words, "Gone for the day." The snowman, his head and shoulders craned as far as possible out the station window, had been watching with great interest the unwrapping of the mysterious bundle, and he now exclaimed with a chuckle which nearly dislodged his paintbrush goatee,
"Very interesting luggage, miss, and also very instructive. However,"
he added more seriously,
"you might just hang it on that hook by the door there."
Alice was about to throw the battered cage into the sea.
You never can tell when that sort of thing will come in handy, miss.
You might be able to use the card on it some day when you go off for a vacation,
suggested Alice, smiling in spite of her disappointment at the idea of a bottomless birdcage like this one ever coming in handy.
I'm afraid I'll never be going on a vacation, miss,
said the snowman sadly.
You see, whoever it was made me, he didn't give me any legs to speak of. Though I don't complain, as very few snowmen have them, and furthermore, miss, it saves me lots of steps. I'm what you might call,
he went on more brightly,
a stationary station agent, or perhaps...
At this juncture Alice heard a sound of joyful squeaking and shrill cheering at the end of the dock, and turning, saw that the handcar had emerged from the water and was coming back toward the station. It was swarming with the sailor rats, who were waving their dripping caps and generally behaving like a crowd of schoolboys off for a vacation. The car did not stop at the station, but kept on at steadily increasing speed, and the shrill cries soon died away in the distance.
"Those must be the sailors from the Somersault Sally,"
exclaimed Alice, remembering the dissolving magic lantern view she had seen in the Tuttle.
"And the others must be close behind, I'm sure. Rats are always the first to leave a sinking ship. At least so the poet said."
It's just as well those sailors didn't stop off here,
said the snowman decidedly.
They're always a rough, noisy lot, miss, and like as not that had stolen the station sign and...
"Why, here are the others now,"
cried Alice. While the snowman was speaking, she had spied 4 familiar heads on the crest of an oncoming wave. The wave broke, depositing the poet, Captain Tiwi, the cook, and the milkman in a neat row at the extreme end of the dock. The milkman, after looking sadly about in a bewildered way for a moment or two, apparently but half awakened by the slight shock of landing, settled back against a convenient post, closed his melancholy eyes, and started snoring at once. The others rose unconcernedly to their feet, and shook themselves like 3 water spaniels, and Alice now heard the cook, who seemed to be continuing an interrupted conversation, remark,
"And what I says is, it's good riddance to 'em. If them 2 lubbers and that old shellback wanted to sail with that tow-headed softy, Captain Shafto, why shouldn't they, I says? And very good too."
"Right you are, matey,"
roared Captain Tiwi so heartily that several icicles fell jingling from the station eaves. The poet, who had just caught sight of Alice, showed no surprise whatever. He merely smiled pleasantly, as if he had naturally expected her to be there, and remarked casually, jerking his thumb at his companions,
"They refer to the butcher, the baker, and turtle, who were taken aboard the meandering Myrtle."
"But I don't remember seeing a turtle aboard the Somersault Sally,"
said Alice.
"Where did he come from?"
"The waves they ran so high, you see, our ship turned turtle. Pardon me if I now leave you for a while, to give my new disguise a trial."
Thus saying, the poet stepped into the little station, from the door of which, after but a few moments, hopped a very large black and white penguin. Startled by this sudden transformation, Alice took a step backward, and tripping over the trailing end of the bedquilt which she had wrapped about her, fell flat. The penguin helped her up clumsily, remarking as he did so,
"There's no need to feel such a shock of alarm. I'm only the poet, who'll do you no harm."
When Alice got to her feet again, the snowman, Captain Tiwi, the cook, and the sleeping milkman were gone, though she was quite sure she still heard muffled snoring. The station itself had disappeared too, and she and the ridiculously disguised poet were standing on what seemed at first to be the flat, icy roof of a high tower of some sort. The end of a ladder,
"It looks just like the railroad track stood up on end,"
thought Alice, showed above a low parapet which bordered the roof. The snoring soon changed to a sound like that of the surf far below them, and peering over the parapet Alice saw, to her astonishment and dismay, that they were on the very highest pinnacle of a tremendous iceberg. Owing to a heavy fog which surrounded the base of the iceberg, it was impossible to see where the ladder led to.
"It's probably rests on the bottom of the sea, and I'm sure I should never dare to climb down anyway,"
thought Alice miserably, adding half aloud,
"Oh dear, I wish I had never come."
Then it occurred to her that she had nothing to do with coming. In fact, she had not come at all. This was a very confusing thought. She felt, though, that the poet was somehow or other to blame for their predicament, so turning to him, she said piteously,
"Whatever shall we do?"
Patting her shoulder with one of his ridiculous flipper-like wings, the poet answered reassuringly,
"Don't fret yourself. Be calm, my dear. I'm really rather glad we're here. An iceberg's safe if gales don't rise, and how it suits my new disguise. Still, if you're feeling timid, well, you might just try your fire bell."
"My fire bell? I haven't any fire bell, and you know it,"
said Alice crossly, for she felt that the poet had chosen a very poor time for teasing her.
"Then what's that hanging from a chain around your neck? A bell, it's plain,"
retorted the poet rather impatiently. Alice looked and saw that there was a tiny bell, about the size of a thimble, hanging from a very fine chain about her neck, though how it got there she couldn't possibly imagine.
"If that's a fire bell, it must be a very young one."
she said, smiling, and her satisfaction at having made this amusing conjecture quite restored her usual good humour. Curious to see what sort of a tinkle such a diminutive bell would make, Alice gently shook the chain. Instantly a deafening, crashing clangor filled the air, frightening the poor child nearly out of her senses. She hastily dropped the little bell, and after one last tremendous echoing peal, the ringing stopped. The poet, who seemed to be shaking under his disguised with suppressed laughter, now remarked very gravely,
"Well, what a voice for one so young! I thought at first Big Ben had rung. The firemen should soon be here to rescue you, but look, my dear, a snowstorm's starting. Really, though, it looks to me like paper snow."
And sure enough, the air was soon full of little curled-up strips of paper such as come inside of snapper mottos.
"Oh,"
cried Alice excitedly.
"I do hope they have proverbs on them. It will be such fun."
She picked up several of the paper snowflakes, and straightening one out, found the following rather disappointing line printed in small red letters. "The penguin is mightier than the swordfish." She handed it to the poet, saying doubtfully,
"Perhaps this one was meant specially for you."
Then half to herself,
"It sounds familiar, but that isn't the usual wording, I'm sure."
The poet took the slip, and after reading it aloud several times very thoughtfully and slowly, he said with great complacency,
"A very proper proverb that, and how 'twill irritate old Sprat. He takes the swordfish part, you see, your Aunt Crusader. As for me, perhaps you know, my dear, that I'm the hero in the pantomime."
Alice recollected that the candlestick maker had said something about being late to a rehearsal of some sort, and she wondered if this were the pantomime that he had referred to. She was too much interested in the snowflake mottos, however, to ask about it just then. Unrolling another of the slips, she read aloud,
"Honey makes the hair grow. Of course that's just nonsense."
she said impatiently.
"Though, come to think of it, I have heard a proverb something like it. Money makes the mare grow, I believe it was."
"Well,"
said her companion judicially,
"perhaps that other too is true, though the wording's tricky, for honey in the comb, you know, would make the hair grow sticky."
"Perhaps you can tell what this one means, too,"
said Alice, smiling at the ingenious explanation of the other.
"Don't count your chickens before you put all your eggs in one basket."
After a moment's reflection, the poet replied,
"In counting chickens, don't you see, there's apt to be some slip, that is, if on arithmetic you've not the firmest grip, and if you slip, why like as not, upon your eggs you fall, and if those eggs are in one lot, it's plain you'll break them all."
Alice was growing very much interested in this game of explanations.
"It's my turn,"
she now exclaimed,
"and here's one that I can almost understand myself. It says, 'It's never too straight to bend,' and I dare say that means—"
She was interrupted by the sudden appearance of a head and shoulders above the edge of the parapet, and the next moment a stocky fellow, unmistakably a fireman, stepped from the edge of the ladder and stood before them, panting. His shirt was the brightest crimson Alice had ever seen, and he wore a big tin fire hat, the brim of which extended like a wide shovel at the back. Hanging from his belt were a small pickaxe, a brass fire trumpet, and a leather bucket about half full of water.
"Two of 'em to save,"
the fireman muttered complainingly when he had recovered his breath.
"Two of 'em, and me on a holiday."
Then, taking the bucket from his belt in a business-like way, he dashed the water over the poet, saying mournfully as he did so,
"And not even enough water for one."
"I'm glad of that,"
thought Alice.
"although the poet doesn't seem to much mind being soaked."
The poet, who apparently had hardly noticed the unexpected bath, was saying cheerfully,
"Don't bother about me, I'll flap down to the ground. Help her, old chap."
Then, holding up the bottomless bird-cage, he went on,
"My helmet for the pantomime. So glad I thought of it in time."
"He certainly didn't have that cage a moment ago,"
thought Alice confusedly.
"I didn't know that old thing was yours."
She started to say, but the poet, in his awkward penguin disguise, had hopped to the parapet, and now, after a few preliminary flappings of his unwieldy wings, flew heavily away. He had left the bird-cage behind him. The fireman, now picking it up, threw it after him with a long, loud shout of,
"Heads below!"
Then turning to Alice, who half feared that she was about to be thrown after the cage, he said politely, but in a rather bored voice which plainly showed that he did not like working like this while on a holiday,
"Well, miss, what'll it be for you, ladder or life net?"
Now Alice did not like the idea of either method of descent, but she felt at least she was somewhat familiar with ladders, while she had never even seen a life net.
"And that ladder,"
she reasoned,
"must lead to somewhere after all, for the fireman came up that way."
So she finally answered rather doubtfully,
"I think I prefer the ladder, if you don't mind."
"Did you say the ladder or the latter, miss?"
inquired the fireman, who had been busy readjusting the things on his belt.
"Though, come to think,"
he added,
"it doesn't really make much difference, as there ain't any life net, miss."
He jammed his hat down, gave a last twitch to his belt, and exclaimed, with more animation than Alice had seen him exhibit,
"Well, miss, ladder it is then."
and the next moment Alice found to her surprise that she was enjoying the very agreeable sensation of sliding, at a pleasurable speed, down a smooth straight banister. In a strangely silent mist all about her, the paper snow was still falling. End of chapter 10.